Welcome back, accounting boffins. We're busy with periodic inventory systems. A quick tip, once again, remember when we're using the perpetual inventory system, we always say make use of the trading stock account, okay? And if we're using the periodic inventory system, we make use of the purchases account. Clearly you can see a difference between the two stock systems. Right, moving on to our question, it says here, again a problem solving question, it says here, identify one problem in each tuck shop and provide one solution in each case. For each problem, relevant figures must be quoted. Now, this is important. One is to identify the challenge, right? Number two is to offer the solution. And number three, use figures to support your answer. That's very important as far as your mark allocation is concerned. Okay. They're telling you that Baker is the owner of 2 school tuck shops, Patty is the manager of shop A, and Benny is the manager of shop B. Each manager is paid 1,000 Rand per week. Each tuck shop sells only chips and juices. The chips cost 5 Rand per packet, important information, and are sold at a profit markup of 50% on cost. The juice is marked up by 25% on cost and is sold at 10 Rand each. So that's information regarding the question. Okay, there's our information. This is shop A and this is shop B, right? So there's our opening stock in units. There's our stock supplied by Baker. There's your closing stock. There's your units unsold. And there's your cash deposited in rands. Okay. So, shop A. What are we identifying as a challenge? It says here, high stock. Let's go back to the question and see what are they referring to. Your opening stock is 300, right? And your closing stock here is 200. That means the units sold were only 420. Okay? Now, if we look at this here, we can see that if you compare 300 and 200, you can see that they received 400 units, although they had stock on hand. Here, watch this here. Their opening stock was 300, right? Yet they received how much? 400 units, clearly indicating to you that they had a lot of stock on hand and yet they received more stock. Clearly, that is a challenge. And the other thing we can do is, let's check our units. If we take our stock and we say, fine, we had 300 plus 400 is 700 minus the 420, clearly you can see that there is a problem with the units that are missing. Once again, 300 plus 400 is 700, right? And if we sold 420, let's do that. If you take your 300 plus your 400, which is 700, 700 is the units you had available, minus the 420 that you sold, you're supposed to have 280 units on hand. Clearly you can see that you do not have units on hand, is only 200. Right, so clearly you can see what's the situation we have here. Units are missing. Right, so there you can see your closing stock should be 280 units. It's only if only 420 units were sold. That means clearly there was a shortage of stock. In other words, there is stock missing in that tuck shop. Okay, what's our solution? With regards to the high stock, monitor sales and stocks accordingly. That means, obviously, look at the number of units that are being sold. That will then determine how much stock must be supplied to that tuck shop. You can't just supply nilly-willy, not taking into consideration how much units are being sold. So stock control should be done daily. Obviously, what is happening here is the manager needs to inform you that, listen here, this is the stock on hand. Obviously, do not send excess stock because surely it is not needed. With regards to the missing stock, what we know that, again, control where stock is displayed. Obviously, you need to make sure that the way you're displaying your stock is not accessible to people that may have bad intentions in order to steal the stock, right? And also make sure, because there's a tuck shop, that it shouldn't be within the reach of your customers, namely the learners or the children, right? So make sure that you put these measures. Again, understand, what are we doing? We're putting control measures in place in order to safeguard the asset. Which asset? In this case here, stock. Bringing us back to what is internal control. The purpose of internal control is to safeguard the assets of a business. Okay. Again, there's our information. We're looking at shop B. What problem can we identify? Let's look at it and see. This is shop B, right? And if you look at your number of units that are being sold and relative to the amount of money that is being deposited, okay? Clearly you will see that your juice for cash deposited is short by 500 Rand. In other words, if you're looking at your units sold, you sold 370 units of the juice, right? And what did we say? We said something about the selling price of the juice. Let's identify it. The juice is sold at 10 Rand each, clearly indicating to you now that if you sold 370 units of the juice, 370 times the 10 Rand will tell you you're supposed to deposit 3,700. However, you're only depositing 3,200, indicating to you that the cash for the juice is short of 500 Rand, right? This means, therefore, that your cash deposited is short by the 500. How did we get that? 3,700 minus the 3,200, which was the actual amount deposited. There we go. This will tell you that you are short of the 500 Rand. Okay. With regards to the high stock, in terms of the chips, let's look at the information again. Here we go. Here we can see that you got a closing unit of 330 units of the chips, meaning that you have too much of chips left on hand. And as you know, these are perishable items. They have expiry dates. So obviously, if the date expires, we won't be able to sell the stock. You will then be sitting with obsolete stock. In other words, you'll have to get rid of that stock, which obviously means a loss for that business. So, with regards to the chips, too much unsold stock compared to the opening balance. You had 150 in your opening balance and 330 as your closing balance. Let's look at it here. Clearly we can see. Watch. You had 150 in your opening balance, and if you compare that to your closing balance, clearly 330. You'd expect it to be more or less the same as your opening balance. Why? Because if you started with 150 units of the chips, surely you should end with more or less the same amount, but this is almost double that amount of stock that you are left over with. Okay, so now how are we going to solve the problem? Remember, firstly, whereas we'll talk about the money that is missing, do daily reconciliations with managers. In other words, at the end of the day, do a till control to say, right, you sold 370 juices, you're selling them at 10 Rand each. The cash that you're supposed to have for the juices should amount to 3,700. But you know that there was only 3,200 for the juices. Clearly you can see the cash that was short. So do this on a daily basis so you can identify any cash that is not being deposited, most probably stolen. Okay? Therefore, this daily reconciliation is very important. The next item or the next challenge that we had was the high stock. Remember, monitor your sales in order to order appropriately. Obviously, you look at the sales of the branch, right? You look at the sales of the branch. Here you go. You're only selling 220 units. If you are selling 220 units, does it make sense to order 400? Certainly not. You're only selling 220. You had 150 at the beginning of the period, meaning that monitor and order appropriately. Because if you're ordering too much, like we said, we're dealing with a perishable item, it can become obsolete. There can be expiry dates on this year, and obviously, once the expiry date appears on that packet of chips, we will not be able to sell it, and it will be a waste, and it will be a loss to the business. So make sure that you order appropriately. Okay. Whenever you are looking at a data response question, what is it that you have to do? Number one, read the problem-solving question carefully and provide reasons based on calculations where required. Right? It is important to read the information. Look at the data that is provided to you. Identify. Look at what we've done. Look at units that you had, units that you sold, find missing units. Look at cash that is being deposited, number of units sold. Do your comparisons to identify where are your challenges. Okay, number two, consider ethical practice in your answers, right? That means a possible question could be, if you are asked now to say that a few packets of chips had an expiry date on them, and the tuck shop owner decided to sell those to the learners, is it ethical to do that? Certainly not. Why? Because once an expiry date appears, it is not fit for consumption and therefore cannot be sold to learners. And therefore, what this means actually is that the business needs to be ethical in its practices. Right. We then looked at measures of internal control. Once again, you will find that I'm repeating this. What is internal control, or what is the purpose of internal control? The purpose of internal control is to safeguard the assets of any business. And in this case here, look at internal control measures that need to be put into place to ensure that we do not have any shortages of cash, shortages of stock, or any other challenges that the business may experience. Okay, guys, you've seen exactly how to go about answering questions of this nature. Make sure that you practice and you are au fait with it. Until the next time, keep your feet on the ground, keep on doing your accounting, and ace your accounting exams. From Ashraf and the team, until next time, goodbye.